Welcome back to SheCan, where role models inspire by telling their stories, their insights, their experiences, and lessons, whether that's life lessons or business lessons, for all of us others who can learn from that. I'm so excited to be welcoming Raquel Riggle today. Raquel, welcome to SheCan. You
Thank you so
are
much.
a certified menopause coach, a health warrior, and founder of Menopause.
That is correct. I
And
am.
Menopause is a membership community that's celebrating menopause in a positive and empowering way, offering lots of tools, advice, live classes, products. It's no fluff, no shame, and a lot of support and a lot of solutions. So tell us a little bit how you set up this nourishing wellness platform for women in perimenopause, menopause, women in sort of midlife. Sometimes it starts earlier, sometimes it starts later. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you
Sure.
got to setting up menopause.
Absolutely. I am first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share my story with you and the world. So Menopause is my brainchild out of it kind of just fueled from trauma, but
Mhm.
it also fueled from a place of wanting to help women that have autoimmune disease and are entering menopause or just people in menopause. It's so important to me to share my story so that people can understand that it's not just a few hot flashes and it's not just, oh, your period is going to go away. There's so many other things that can impact you going into menopause. For me, it started with I was about 45 and I started getting kind of sick to the point where I was turning yellow and my ankles were swelling. I mean, they were like the size of elephants. It was so incredible. And then I started feeling just more and more off, and I couldn't lose weight prior to this for probably the preceding 5 years. I had tried to lose weight, and nothing I did was helping. So I just was like, well, I guess, it's just middle age, and that's just how it goes because I didn't really understand menopause at the time. And so when my eyes started turning yellow around 45, I thought, well, I really need to go in and talk to a doctor and see what's actually happening. And when I went into the hospital, I drove myself to ER. They just kind of looked at me and they were like, "Well, you're coding." And at the time, I really didn't understand what coding meant, but coding is basically like you're in distress. And so I had acute liver failure, and what this what this time frame was 2020. And so I, of course, was stuck at home with my children, and I had a few extra drinks and not anything that I would describe as being an alcoholic, but the hospital labeled me as an alcoholic. And I thought, what? What are you talking about? And they wanted to drain my body. They thought I had ascites, and ascites is like a liver bile buildup.
Mhm.
And I didn't, it turns out I didn't have that at the time, and I didn't allow them to do any draining, but they kept me in the hospital for seven days. And they did all sorts of different testing, and they just kind of went through like different checks and balances, but nowhere in there did anybody mention my age or the fact that this could be associated with menopause. Because with menopause, it does exacerbate autoimmune disease to a pretty high level. So I went home with absolutely no answers. I had been completely shamed by the doctors. They had made me feel like I was just below any kind of like level of humanity because they kept calling me an alcoholic. I had a doctor come in and ask me how I could do this to myself. And the reality is my eyes were yellow, my body was yellow, my liver was failing, and they couldn't figure it out. So they wanted to blame me. So they did all of this medical gaslighting to me, not because they wanted to do their damn job. And that was the most infuriating part to me. So they sent me home with no answers, absolutely no answers. I mean, they had blown my veins. They they had done like all these tests, but nowhere was the word menopause, and maybe this is a hormonal did that ever come up. So when I went home, they said, here, you need to go see a gastroenterologist. And I said, okay, I will go and I'll see a GI. And he kept giving me the same answers, like you're an alcoholic, and I'm like, I don't even really drink. And before that, I never really drank. I mean, I wasn't like a humongous drinker. And so I got sicker and sicker and sicker to the point where I had lost 80 pounds in about 3 months. And I was vomiting morning, noon, night. I'd wake up from a dead sleep 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And when I say vomiting, I mean like my soul was leaving my body kind of vomiting. Like it was just so bad. I had no muscle mass. I was barely able to walk. All my hair fell out, my eyebrows fell out. I even considered shaving my head at one point just because I was like I had so little hair. It was like maybe it would just be better if I shaved it. Um, so I get about 9 months into this, I'm just horribly sick, still no answers. They're throwing all these medications at me for liver failure and all of these other things that just weren't accurate to what my actual problem was. So I finally get it within myself to call a local or a hospital out of my state. And so I go to this hospital and I find a hepatologist, and the hepatologist was great. He said, based off your records, it looks like you might have other things going on. Still, again, nowhere in this did anybody mention menopause.
Mm.
So I go in, he does an upper GI, which is the gold standard to test if you have celiac disease, which is what I do have. And so they do the upper GI, which is they, put you out, they put something down, they do a biopsy of your intestines.
Yeah.
In the meantime, he checked my liver, he checked my bile ducts, and everything looked good with my livers, which indicated even more that this was all based off of autoimmune disease. So he calls me and he's like, yep, we're right. It's celiac. You're just going to have to go gluten free. You can't have anything wheat, barley, rye. And I'm like, okay, I can live with this. Still not anywhere in this. Anybody has said menopause.
Mm.
So my estrogen levels are just continuing to drop and continuing to tank. And I have no idea. Just I'm getting better at this point very slowly. And I mean, I'm putting like a pound on every 6 months. It was just not a quick recovery. And my periods come back because I'd started putting weight on. And I thought, okay, all right, well, life is going to resume. And then they came back with a vengeance. And it was bad. To the point where you couldn't leave the house. I mean, for the ladies out there, you know what it means to bleed through, and that was happening within every 30 minutes. So I went to the gynecologist, and again, I said, I don't know what's happening. I need some help. And she said, let's go ahead and do an ablation. And for those of you that don't know what an ablation is, it's where they go in and they cauterize your uterus, and that means it helps you to alleviate any periods and or like slow them down basically, which I was totally fine with at the time because I thought, well, heck, at least I could leave the house, after being so sick. And I mean, I had my muscle atrophied. I had to go to physical therapy to be able to move again. So to have any quality of life back to me was huge. So I get all prepared. They go in and they did some samples on my uterus to make sure that I was okay to do that and to do the ablation. And right before the procedure, the gynecologist in the main practice gets arrested for prostitution.
Lovely.
So yeah. I thought to myself, this is a joke. There's no way this can just continue to be happening. So he's arrested for prostitution. I obviously do not go through with this ablation. And again, before all of this, nobody says anything. I did get one of the gynecologists to say, hey, there's something going on with your thyroid, which also is a symptom of autoimmune and menopause. And so within that, before the prostitution bust, they did give me Synthroid for my thyroid, which I think in retrospect probably kind of pulled back on some of my symptoms that I had going on with menopause. So it bought me a little more time to kind of recover and feel a little more like myself. So I get on the Synthroid. The periods are still just as bad. I just kind of go through, the next year and a half, I would say. And I'm doing okay. I'm working out. I'm feeling okay. I feel like I'm eating better because I'm gluten free, and I have a pretty good mindset about me. And then I go to Florida because I'm going to visit a friend, and I'm sitting at her house, and I didn't feel right for like the when I say not right, I didn't feel like myself. I didn't feel like who I am in my own skin. I just felt so just kind of out of it, like kind of like this tingling sensation in my skin. And I just had this anxiety that I couldn't really put my finger on, but it was just enough to really be bothersome. And as I'm sitting at her house, out of the blue, I jump up and I run down the hallway and I'm freaking out. I'm screaming like, oh my God, I can't calm down. I can't calm down. And it was just the most intense panic attack I've ever had in my entire life. And I've never had a panic attack. I've never had anxiety. I've never struggled with depression, none of it. And to me, that was my eye opener. So I spent the next week of our vacation laying in my friend's bed with the blankets over my head. I couldn't shower. I couldn't get up. I just had fallen into just this like panic/depression. And my husband and them were going out and they were doing all the vacation things. They're going sightseeing and going to dinners. And I'm just paralyzed with anxiety and just angst, and I'm just laying there with the blankets over my head, and to the point I didn't even want to leave their house. I was
Mm.
like, I don't just leave me here. I'm not going to fly home. No way. I'll just be here. Um, so that really was an eye opener for me. When I got home, I finally was able, about 2 weeks later, able to kind of pull myself together. It took that long to really to have those self conversations and pull myself out of that like space mentally. And I contacted an online doctor after some conversations with a friend of mine. She said, have you thought about menopause? And I said, no, no. I mean, what are you talking about? That's just like that's hot flashes. And you know, neither of us at the time put two and two together that all of this stuff leading up to it could have been from menopause, but just the freakouts and the panic turned into, well, maybe this could be something else hormonal. So I contacted an online provider that specializes in just menopause, and she was amazing. She actually kind of dug in. She got me on the lowest dose of HRT. And for those of you that don't know, HRT is hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah.
There's a few different ways that you can get the hormone replacement therapy. For myself, I opted for the patch. So I have a patch of estrogen and I have a pill for progesterone. And why I have a pill for progesterone is because I still have a uterus. If you don't have a uterus, sometimes, depending on what your provider says or your doctor says, you won't need to have that. But definitely, this is a conversation for your provider and you. And make sure you have a good provider, somebody that you trust, somebody that works with you and not at you, because that is so
Yes.
important, especially in this phase. So I spoke with her. We got on the most minimal dosage, and I was starting to see some slight improvements, but um nothing that I could still like manage. It still was unmanageable to me. So we played with it and tinkered with it probably for the last, I'd say, year. And I just within probably the last 9 months, I was able to really get it dialed into something that worked for me. But prior to that, I was on this up and down roller coaster of just hormones and emotions. And I fell into just this deep depression, like depression that I've never experienced in my entire life. And I've always been a really optimistic, outgoing, like in charge of my own life kind of person. And I mean, I've raised 4 children. I worked for a bank. I was a loan officer for a mortgage company. I sell real estate. I've always had my stuff together, for a lack of a better term. And to feel this out of control and this spun was just a space I've never experienced. I was saying things like, I understand how Robin Williams could go through with taking his own life, because I honestly thought to myself, like, if I can sit in this room and feel absolutely nothing, and all of these people are laughing and joking, like, what is the point? And it sucks to feel that way. And to know that nobody's coming to save you. You have to save yourself is the hardest conversation you will ever have with yourself.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
genuinely is.
Yeah. And I think that's where we're so bad at as women, because no man would sit this
Oh,
long with such discomfort. And
yes.
so I want to, first of all, I hear you, I see you, Raquel. I have
Thank you.
a similar story. Didn't have liver failure, but I have celiac disease. I was in very early menopause in the beginning of my 40s when no one mentioned the word for 2 years. And I literally had panic attacks so bad I thought I cannot leave the house again. I
Oh,
wasn't
Stephanie, I'm
functioning.
so,
And I'm the most
yes.
optimistic, energetic, generous person who loves to. I was running a growing charity in Africa. I had to go back and forth all the time. I mean, it was really awful. And I have not heard the word menopause for the first 2 years, I think. And then went on the same journey, tinkering with HRT. And honestly, 10 years later, now I'm 53, it's an ongoing journey. And, I sometimes think we don't learn this. I had never heard of any of those symptoms before. I didn't have any hot flushes ever, actually.
Yes.
I had every other symptom in the book. And so I feel we are now in a time where we can talk about menopause. I mean, people still don't want to hear us talk about periods. They don't want to hear us say,
Right.
talk about our changing bodies or that we are changing in general. And I think everybody is sort of thinking, oh, these poor women, and, thank God this is not me. And so
Yes.
I always
I
look at
agree with you a
many
thousand percent
friends
on
who look
that.
at me and think, oh, this poor thing.
Yes.
And I just think, yeah, I would hope that, you'll have a different journey. But yes, it's a really, really, really a crazy journey for some of us, and some are very lucky, but I think that most women experience some form of those symptoms, maybe not to this extreme, but some form of those symptoms. And
I
because we
agree.
don't advocate for ourselves and we don't pull the handbrake and say, I'm going to take the time and I'm just going to, whoever is our partner needs to take over and needs to give us this time to figure out what is going on. And I think that's why we're having the conversations, Raquel. And for you, it was a real pain to purpose journey. You stepped into your purpose. You understood that can't just be me, it must be many other women out there who have similar journeys. So you
Yes.
became a menopause coach. You set up Menopause. So talk to us a little bit about what you do at Menopause and how does it work? How does the membership work? What do you give to women who become members?
Sure, sure. So menopause, just to kind of back into my story just a little further, menopause was born because I had the conversation with my online provider, and the provider gave me all of this information. And my brain fog from menopause was so bad that I could not remember my conversation. And when I knew enough to go to the pharmacy to pick up the HRT, and I looked at it, and because I couldn't remember the conversation, I thought they had given me the wrong medication. And I sat in my car and I just bawled and bawled and bawled. I just, I went home and I talked to my friend, and I had her reading me the doctor's notes as I'm crying because I clearly just lost my whole life. And she's reading me these instructions. My husband's trying to figure out where to put the patch on me so that I can at least start administering these medications. And menopause was born from that, because that moment in my life was so defining, because I thought, how many women are out there that don't have a good friend to pick up the phone and say, let me read you the doctor's notes. Let me walk you through this process. Let's do this together. And to me, that is what menopause is founded on. Like, I think that there are so many women that we have friends, but do we have like real connected human beings that you can call without judgment, being afraid of saying the raw truth to, and having that conversation with them. So at Menopause, we offer community, and we offer um, a accountability, an accountability partner, because when you put these systems in place, because as you address menopause, it is a whole systematic thing. It can't just be, let's throw some HRT at it and you're going to be great, because that's not how it works. You have to, like you said, and I appreciate your story so much because that validates the reason that I'm sitting here. And I don't think
Yeah.
you understood that. Like that gave me chills to know, because I am so, not that I'm happy that you went through that, but I'm happy that you understand. And I appreciate that. But it's the accountability of putting the whole system together for yourself, the workout, the supplements, the eating better, the community, forcing yourself to go out when you don't want to, getting yourself out of that bed, even when it feels physically like pain. Even brushing your hair sometimes becomes so much work. So I understand that, and I want to help people get to a place where they can manage it and they can strive for better, because this isn't the 50s anymore, ladies. Like we're not being set out to pasture. We we back in the 50s, men in the US used to ship their wives off to the insane asylum because they were going through menopause. And I'm not going to the insane asylum. I'm just going to heal myself.
Yeah. Yeah, and get the
So that is
right
what we offer.
support, right? That could be many different
Yes.
things. And those things
Yes.
go hand in hand. And, some people swear on acupuncture and others swear on homeopathy and others swear by the patches and others the creams and some do the
Right.
pills and some don't do any of that. And they have, extreme diet or way of sort of eating that helps them.
Yes.
So I think as you said, it's not one thing that will fix everything. And we have to think about our brain health, our heart health, our bone health, right? As
Yes.
just a
Yes.
basis for longevity and having a nice second half of our life. So there's a lot to think about. Tell us a little bit from all of your insight, Raquel, what tips do you give to women who might be listening and say, I do feel different. I'm not quite sure what it is. It could be perimenopause, the beginnings of menopause. What tips would you give them?
Tips I would look, there's over 54 symptoms to menopause. And I think, ladies, that it's really important that we dig in and we understand that, because even though you're not experiencing like the token, hot flashes or the token, freak outs or the fits of rage, there's other things happening. You could have burning mouth syndrome, which is like a tingling metallic taste in your mouth. You could have tinnitus, which is ringing in your ears. You could have itchy, crawly skin sensations, which feels like ants crawling due to um, lots of estrogen. I mean, estrogen, it's our number one functioning system in a woman's body. And when it declines, it starts to impact so many things. Like you think about your cardiovascular health, your gut health, your joints. I mean, a lot of women experience heart attacks because they are in menopause.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom went through menopause without HRT and she ended up, her bladder fell out. She's had a hysterectomy. She's had 2 heart attacks. And I view that as my learning experience,
Mhm.
because I think I need to take lessons from what people have done in the past, and I need to understand, and I want to help other women understand that it's not just going to be a quick fix. Give yourself a year. Give
Yeah.
yourself an entire year and really dedicate to the length of fixing and healing yourself. Give yourself that time to heal. Give yourself, I talk a lot about, practicing self-care, and when women hear self-care, it's like, oh, I'm getting my nails done, or oh, I'm going self-care, I'm going to have my hair done. No, women need to understand, or ladies, you need to understand that self-care is, if you're freaking out in the bathroom before you have to go somewhere, or you're having a panic attack because things are just too chaotic, or you're over hyperstimulated, sit down, take the breaths necessary, and just really sit with that and acknowledge those feelings. And if you're late, you're late. If little Johnny doesn't get to school on time, then that just doesn't happen that day. But you have to take care of you before you can show up for anybody else. And I think women have just been so predisposed to the caretaker role that we forget
Yeah.
to take care of us.
Yeah, the serving role. I always think it's,
Yes.
instead of following what is right for us or any desire to not just desire in terms of, bodily desire. It's really about the desire to put ourselves first every now
Yeah.
and then. It's all about serving. And we
Yes.
have built a whole society around it.
A
And
whole society.
and I think I love some of those roles that I hold. I really do. But I am
Me
not,
too.
I'm looking at it very differently now. And I don't do it anymore because I'm just here to serve. I'm doing it. And when I decide I do certain things, I do them with a lot of heart and intention. And, it just feels different. So how can we reframe this phase in our lives that really every woman goes through, Raquel? And we are 50% of the world's population. We are so many women around the world.
So many women around the world. I think for me, reframing this phase of life is taking my power back and putting myself first. And even though it is really cumbersome to go through all of these processes, managing the HRT, making sure that you're taking all of the supplements, there are days, and believe me, more days than not, that I don't want to get up and work out, but I get up and I do the workout, and I get up and I do the walking, or I have the conversations. And I think it's really important to point out that community is such a big thing for women in our space, because we need to know that there's other people around us that have that same experience. And social bonds, they reduce cortisol levels, and cortisol is our stress hormone, and we need to have that reduced. And I think it's important to understand that you can get through this. This is not just a cliff you're walking off of. This is a bridge, and we're here to bridge that gap with you. If you're having that panic attack at 2 in the morning and you just don't know how to calm down, call us, because that's what we're here for. And
Mm,
we're here to help you learn, and in through fun ways, how to redo your makeup, or learn how to cook hormone friendly food, learn what a mocktail is that can help you reduce your cortisol. I mean, we just have a lot of quirky, fun things that we try to incorporate so women learn how to live for them again. Because I know for me in particular, my children are now grown. And so that now that my kids are grown, what do I have to serve? So I need to serve myself. I need to stop forgetting about me and serve me.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean, like you said, that we walk away from everything and we go totally aggro and nobody gets anything from us any longer. This just means that we're going to take that 5 minutes for us, and we're going to acknowledge ourselves, and we're going to do what is necessary to make sure that we are vibrant and thriving through these later years.
Yeah. So you talked about the families. How can we reframe this and how can we educate or help our families support us? Because those are phases where we will need support, and we are very
Yes.
reluctant to ask for help, right? I
Oh
think
my
that's
gosh,
one of the
yes.
things. I mean, I literally white knuckled my way through there, and I,
You and me both, sister.
yeah,
That's a good question. I think conversations and explanations and a lot of talking. And it's hard because you have to reframe that conversation. You can't just keep throwing the same thing at it, like I'm in menopause, because from my family and my husband, they didn't understand what that meant. I remember
yeah,
telling my husband in Florida, I said, "Oh my God, I wonder if this could be menopause." And he was just like, "What? Yeah, right, whatever." And and it was. And now looking back, like how could I mean, that was just such a pivotal moment, like, oh, you're in menopause could have been his response. However, it was like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. Not that that was any fault of his, but I think it's how we have to learn how to change these conversations with our families and our children. And it took a lot of learning and a lot of talking, and talking to my kids about what HRT did and how that helps me and what it is that I'm experiencing and why I'm experiencing it. And those were not easy conversations, especially because I have boys. So they were
yeah.
like, okay, mom, what? But now they know, and I'll say things like, I'm hyperstimulated, I need 5 minutes, or I'll put my headphones on and I'll listen to some music, or like a meditation. and bring myself back, and then I'm better for everybody. Because if you just keep going and you're just pounding your head against the wall when you feel like that, it's going to become an explosion. And nobody wants that atomic bomb in their family and especially in their home. And that's what we're aiming and striving to create, is the peace within yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you said that beautifully, and I love that and I remember my very, very lovely husband who said, when is this menopause over?
Yeah.
As if this is sort of something that will be finished at one point, which is so sweet. But I realize now we have no idea. No doctor ever explained it to me properly. I literally had no idea that 10 years in, I'm still fiddling around and optimizing things and, wow. And so, yes. And I think those conversations, and we know that connection comes from vulnerability and showing up authentically. But because it's such a difficult topic that challenges others, but also ourselves, because you have to
Yes.
be really brave to come out with these truths that are our truths. But, A, they're not so fun to hear, and B,
Mhm.
they're not normal yet, and or maybe will never be. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on in women's health, which is very encouraging, but we're
It
starting from a
is.
place of nowhere, so there's far to go. And
Unless it's
so,
reproductive health, they've got a huge amount of research there. But when you look at the menopause, there's no research, there's no data. And so it's maddening almost, because you do feel like and I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's definitely masking symptoms, and
yeah,
we're not here to mask any longer. I want to take that mask off and talk
yeah.
about the realities.
Yeah, and we know that women burn out in midlife. They leave the workplaces in droves. So I think thank God we've started having the conversations because they're so necessary. So how do you help women when it is about the place of work? We've talked about ourselves, we've talked about in the frame of a family. What about the workplace?
The workplace is kind of an interesting one, because you're still going to be facing all of the same adversities, whatever that looks like in your place of work. But I think when you get down to the basics and the healing, and really doing like the shadow work on your own self, and you're pushing yourself, even if it's 5 minutes to get up and do a little bit of stretching or a little bit of whatever, to just build on that so
Mm,
that you can build on yourself, getting your cortisol levels back in place, getting your endocrine system back in place through healthier lifestyles and changes. And I know we all hear that, and I know we're browbeaten to death over like, eat healthy and exercise. But I'm not saying just eat healthy and exercise. I'm saying I'll show up and I'll be there, and I'll walk through that path and that journey with you. I mean, that's how we're going to get back to being able to sit in front of our computer and focus, because there's still days that I sit down and I'm like, I can't even focus. My mind is still brain fog, or I didn't sleep well the night before, or my hormones could just be doing what they do. And there's still those days. So it's just giving yourself grace and knowing that it's okay to give yourself grace, and that there's a community of people out there. And it doesn't have to be just Menopause. It could be any community. I just want the message to be, find the support, and
yeah.
know that the support comes from a plethora of things. It's not just one therapy. You need multiple therapies to really get yourself back to a place where you can manage you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are your habits, Raquel? What are the habits that keep you well in yourself, aligned, able to show up?
Yes, my habits. Well, they were so ever changing, but just because, as you said, you mentioned, you're still tweaking and modifying, and I still tweak and modify. I mean, I think my core habits are, I'm pretty regimented on my schedule. And at first, I'm not going to lie, ladies, that really kind of didn't sit with me, because I'm such a free spirit and I really just didn't want to be beholden to a schedule or beholden to some ideology. But as I started to dig in further and see that it worked, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I get up every morning at 6:30. I kind of meander around for about a half hour, and then I work out from 7:30 or from 7 to 7:30. And then after that, I go on a walk, and then I start my day slowly. I always make sure I'm taking my supplements. I start in the morning with my morning supplements, and then throughout the day, I'm really mindful of making sure I'm drinking enough water, that I'm getting enough hydration through electrolytes, which I think are huge. Um, and just eating properly throughout the day. I'm really conscious of, no sugar, obviously more fiber, especially soluble fiber, which is huge for people in menopause. They say 25 grams of soluble fiber is key. And the soluble fiber, what it does is it helps move things through your system so that you can get rid of a lot of the toxins, like excess estrogen buildup or
Yeah.
anything like that to kind of keep you more even. So I really focus on those types of things. And then in the evening, I have, a really, I kind of call cooking my glass of wine now because that's what I use to zen out. And so I'll go in the kitchen and I will just kind of cook, and I'm like a little Swedish chef in there, just chopping. And then I try to take an evening walk. And I'm not always good about the evening walk, but I definitely try. And then I always take my evening supplements, and I manage my bedtime where I give myself a good 30 minutes to an hour where I just have decompression time for just me, where I get to just kind of lay in bed and my kids aren't asking me questions, my husband doesn't need anything, and it's just my time. And to me, I think that's probably the most important time of the day for me because it actually gives me a chance to think. It could be thinking about absolutely nothing. It could be thinking about researching recipes. I mean, it could be anything. But that in itself is just giving yourself that decompression time is just so huge. So huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing, Raquel. So what does success look like for you in menopause?
Success looks like I'm sitting here today. Last year around this time, I don't think I would have been able to do this. I had weeks where I couldn't get out of the bed, and I had days where I couldn't shower and I couldn't brush my hair, and it did feel painful. So for me, success is having this conversation with you.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. So how do you want to advertise menopause to our listeners? Who is menopause for?
Menopause is for every woman that's going through menopause. And especially if you didn't have if you did not have an autoimmune disease and now you do because of menopause, I'm especially the person to talk to. But menopause in general, I'm happy to have any conversation with you. I mean, we can flush through whatever it is that you've got going on. And, even if I'm not right or I don't have all the answers, I can help guide you to the places that would have some answers. And I've spent a lot of time researching and a lot of time studying and a lot of time just gathering information that is what I feel is helpful for not only myself, but everybody else. And, it's just information you can take back and have conversations with your provider and that you can take back and you can really like sit with and flesh through and hopefully it resonates with you the way it did me.
Yeah, incredible. So we would like to encourage everyone to look up Menopals, which is
Yes.
Meno and then Palz, and tell us a little bit about your plans and goals for the rest of this year and next year.
Well, right now we're in the build out phase, which has been kind of an interesting thing. I've been actually working on this site for about a year and a half now, and it's just now gotten to the point where I'm able to put it out there. There's so many intricacies with building a website that I had absolutely no idea about. But I have a therapist coming online in October. So we'll start to add in some additional classes. We're going to have meditations, we'll have some group coaching. We're going to have some other really good courses that are going to just talk about like, shadow work and how to address these feelings and things like that. We have some beauty consultants coming online to help women start to, find trends that are great while you're in menopause. Think about ways to put your makeup on because I know for me, I felt like the ugly duckling for a little while, just
Mm.
lost hair and no eyebrows. So
Yeah,
to
hair is
re
a big thing I hear a lot.
Yes, yes. And it's just just a matter of rebuilding all of that. I'm going to put together some classes, just different classes for hobbies and things like that. So I think it's important that women get an opportunity to reinvent themselves and find things that they like, because once you are doing things that you like, it's not a job, and it's not like, I don't want to do this, Like, I know that's how exercise can feel to some people. So which I try to make really interesting, fun, engaging exercise classes. I've got some really great trainers that work with me on that. We different things with just like cooking and the cooking classes. I have one coming up September 7th that should be just amazing. And it's just hormone friendly
Wow.
foods, the ways to cook, just retraining how you are thinking and retraining how you like view the world.
Yes. I mean, I'm so thankful, Raquel, that you've soaked up all of this information and that now you're able to pass it on to others who feel like this is something they need. What takeaways would you like our listeners to have from your story today, Raquel?
I think the takeaways today are listen to your bodies, ladies. If you feel off, if you feel like, there's a little bit of swelling that you can't explain, some color in your skin. I recently lost a really dear friend of mine to a heart attack, and she's in the perimenopause phase. And I can't help but think that that was probably part of it. I mean,
Hmm.
I'll never have answers to that, but I definitely think that that was probably a contributing factor. So listen to your body. I mean, if somebody says like you don't look right, or you're exhausted all the time to the point where you just can't even pick your head up off the pillow, make some calls. Try to get into somebody and or ask questions to somebody, get some guidance on that.
Yeah. Ask questions and don't let them fob you off.
Yeah, because you're the
Mm.
CEO of your body. You're the CEO of your healthcare, ladies. Don't forget that. Don't let a doctor tell you different, because you have to be in charge.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Raquel Riggle, today on SheCan with your story of how you founded Menopause and your story of how you got to where you are today, which is so inspiring and gives so much insight to other women.
Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.